this thing on, table, behind me. I'm going to show you the top. I'm going to show you how I did the top. Super fun, super cool, and not as hard as that looks. I'm going to show you how to do a raised stencil using a stencil, special product, and it's called Wood Icing. Actually, Wood Icing is the company, and it's called Textura Paste. And I'm going to show you how to push it through a stencil so that you can come up with a design. Here you go. Whoa! Just like that. So this was like this. I sanded it. So I sanded it all down. This part was already there. I did not do the diamonds. The diamonds are actually in the wood. But I did do all of these parts. All these here parts. All of this is a raised stencil. Oh, like that. You see it? See it? Yeah. It's super cool, right? I'll show you how to do it. So let's get started. So the first thing I did was take the existing finish off the table using my orbital sander. Took me a little bit of work. I started with a 60 or 80 grit and then progressed up to a 120 grit, and just making sure all the existing finish was off and my surface was nice and smooth. I finished preparing my surface by using some 220 grit sandpaper and sanded by hand, making sure my surface was all nice and smooth. And then I wiped away any dust using an old paintbrush. Next, I found the center of the table. This was pretty easy on this one since I had a design built into the table itself. I just counted the squares and found the center of the table, but you could use a tape measure. Now comes the fun part. I'm going to use my Textura paste from Wood Icing and my offset spatula, and I'm going to push the wood icing through the stencil. I love to use wood icing because of the way it stains. Give my wood icing just a little bit of a stir. It sort of has a consistency like peanut butter, so it's really nice and smooth and has a nice body to it, which makes it perfect for doing some raised stenciling as well as some other faux techniques. I put just a little bit of product on my offset spatula, and then I very carefully hold the spatula at a 45-degree angle and just move that product around over the stencil itself. I would recommend either using a stencil adhesive or at least some painter's tape to hold your stencil down. I've been doing this a really long time and I very infrequently use those things, but if you are a beginning stenciler, I highly recommend using those. Once you've got the product all over the stencil, you want to very carefully remove your stencil while your product is still wet, and voila, there's your design. I had picked a little larger medallion for the center, and now I've got a smaller medallion on the same stencil sheet, and I'm going to add those smaller medallions at every single point where those diamonds in the wood pattern meet. And really, when you're doing a raised stenciling, just like when you're doing stenciling with paint, it takes very little product, so there's no need to load that offset spatula up with a ton of product. You just wind up wasting it. So just a little bit of product, just enough that you can comfortably move it around over the stencil with a little bit of light pressure. I'm just moving around the whole table and everywhere where those diamond patterns in the wood meet, adding my little medallion. You'll notice there's a big wet spot right there. I had not quite gotten one of those little medallions in the right place, and so no worries, I was able to fix it. I just scraped off the wood icing design that I had put down and then took a little bit of a damp rag and wiped it away. No problem. I'll wait for it to dry and then I'll go back and I'll redo that spot. You may notice as you continually use the same stencil that it starts to get a little bit clogged up. Just take a baby wipe and wipe it off as you go, or just run it under the sink and clean it. And on another note, you want to make sure that when you are totally done with your project that you clean your stencil off right away and don't let that wood icing dry on there. And don't worry about your designs being perfect. They're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. That's the beauty of what we do and having furniture that is hand painted, is that it is organic and natural and not perfect. It is perfectly imperfect. For the little banding that goes around the edge of the table, I chose a different stencil for that, and it's part of an Indian inlay stencil kit that I have, and we're going to do that in high speed. After the wood icing is completely dry, maybe about an hour or so, give it a good sanding. You want to make sure that there's no rough edges. I'm just using some 220 grit sandpaper all by hand to go over the wood icing raised stencil and make sure that it's nice and smooth and soft. And then just like we did before, I'm using an old paintbrush to get rid of all of that sanding dust. You'll notice that there's a fair amount of dust created when using the wood icing, so you may want to use a mask if you need to. Next step is to add some color to our tabletop. I am using Debbie's Design Diary DIY Liquid Patina Dark and Decrepit. It acts just like a wood stain, but the benefit is that it is water-based. It was super hot in my shop this day. I don't have air conditioning in there, and so my Dark and Decrepit was drying really super fast. You could, since this is water-based, add a little bit of water to your product, add some water to your brush, or, as I'm going to show you, just go ahead and spray the tabletop just to get that product to move a little bit. I just took a spray bottle and sprayed a little bit of water on that tabletop. Really what I probably should have done was also added a little bit of water to my Dark and Decrepit, taken some out of the container, put it in a bowl, and added just a little bit of water just so I could really get that product to move. Where I have the medallions, you'll notice I take the brush and go in kind of a swirly motion, and that's just so that I can really work that Dark and Decrepit in all those little nooks and crannies. I want to make sure that it's all covered and that I'm getting that Dark and Decrepit in between where all those little designs are. So then I just grab a clean lint-free cloth. I like to use Scott's rags in a box. They kind of pop out the top like tissues, and it is a lint-free, sort of like a paper towel, but a little bit thicker than that. I fold mine in thirds and then fold it in thirds again, usually, to make kind of like a little pad out of it. And I'm just going over that tabletop to get off any excess dark and decrepit that may just be sitting on the top. So you'll notice I'm spraying a little bit of water directly onto the area where I have stained and I'm wiping. And the reason I'm doing that is I want a little bit of age and different colorations in my tabletop. My base is going to be painted in a rusty crusty finish with lots of layer and texture because that's what I like to do. And I don't want my tabletop to look incredibly pristine. I don't want it to look like a brand new tabletop on top of a table that looks old and worn out. And so by spraying just a little bit of water and kind of wiping back, I'm sort of giving my table a little bit more of a worn appearance, and maybe even giving it a couple water spots just so that it doesn't look so brand new. So I use my lint-free cloth just to wipe it, make sure that I don't have any dark and decrepit just floating on the top. And I'm just going through and making sure that every little nook and cranny in my wood icing designs is covered and that I don't have any weird smeary lines hanging out anywhere. And here we go, the finished product. I love wood icing for raised stencil on bare wood. There is no other product on the market that I know of like this that I can stain over my raised stencil and have it look like wood. It gives the appearance of it being hand carved or wood applique and really takes your furniture projects to the next level. You could also use an oil-based stain. I have done that before as well. That works just as well as a water-based. I finished up my tabletop by sealing it with 3 coats of General Finishes High Performance Top Coat in Flat Out Flat. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you liked it. If you do like it, make sure you follow along. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. Oh, and YouTube. I'm a fledgling YouTube video maker. And you can find me here. This is my business right there. It's called Junked Up. So I will see you in all of those places.